Oh, yeah. This is the most revolutionary technology, far superior than the latest iPad with the M chip 2, whatever. I have a place where I have taught musicians who are struggling to find a way to make a living with their talent from going from the corporate world into a full-time career as a music producer and a craftsperson.
Tommy Zee, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks so much, brother. So happy to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and the best part is who knows where it's going to go. The goal is to help the listeners that are staring down the barrel at building a personal brand, but they're in a corporate role, they're still in a career, and they're looking to make that transition or take that step, something I know you've done very successfully, but I thought we'd start somewhere a little bit fun. Tell me about being a rapper and a DJ.
You know, growing up, I was always amazed at how music has this magical power like, especially when I was like 12 years old. And, you know, the first time as a young boy, you start to get emotional, you start to get even sentimental, you know, you start even looking at girls, and that's when it kind of begins. And I was amazed how much music amplified that. And I was like, what is this black magic that, you know, watching Karate Kid and listening to that ballad, The Power of Love? I was like, what is it doing to me, man? You know, so naturally I became curious at how this science and art works of music. And so as soon as I was able to, you know, 15, 16 years old, I wanted to be an engineer of human emotions. And I wanted to figure out, how do you actually come up with the right sounds and the right music, and what do you do to get the girls? That was in my initial goal, of course, as a teenage boy. So the best thing I could figure out in my 2-minute brainstorm was, yeah, you should be a white rapper, which at the time, this is the 90s, you know, this was a rarity. This was not your everyday sort of thing. And so I started performing at high school talent shows, and my rap career culminated in having 2 consecutive #1 radio hits in the place where I was born, which is Poland in Eastern Europe. But I did this from the land that I emigrated to, which was Canada. Okay. And I thought the fastest route to success will be as English/Polish rapping MC who's living in Toronto, but is now sending his music back to Poland, which in the 90s, not only is it a white rapper, but is a Polish dude who's rapping from Canada. It was quite a thing. So that's the first lesson for anyone listening and watching. See if you can tap into a unique combination of factors that only you can have, which could be location, could be immigration, could be story, could be natural predispositions. This goes a long way into creating your unique formula. And then when I realized that actually I just don't see myself as a 30, 40-year-old rapper. Like I just don't see myself giving 100% to this thing. I think it was kind of like a temporary fascination. My love for hip hop, by the way, is a lifelong love, but it's another thing to actually turn it into your career. So when I realized, okay, I'm probably not going to be a rapper my whole life, I went to the next step, which was DJing, which became a much longer and a much more fruitful expression of my musical love, because I managed to actually become, I don't want to say a full-time DJ, because I had a full-time career and we'll talk about it, but I was playing as much as full-time DJs do, meaning I had 3 or 4 nights a week where I was a resident at one of the major nightclubs in Toronto. And I also did some traveling as a DJ. And the art of DJing taught me a lot about curation and then the placement of the right musical moment at the right time and building a narrative out of it. There's so many parallels between great communication and DJing. And so I'm very thankful for that period of time, but also, like with many things in my life, I thought, am I going to be a 45, 50, 60-year-old DJ? Probably not. So I'm glad I thought ahead, and I managed to start thinking proactively about the next chapter after that, which was building on the one previous. And that's sort of like what I've been practicing in my life, which is like, okay, this step is not going to last forever. And if it's not going to last forever, then how do you prepare for the next step? And what do you take with you so that the accumulation of all of your experience is not just being thrown out, but you're basically using everything you've gained in your story to make the next step forward? Wow, that's a long ass way to answer a simple question.
I think it's a great answer because people want to peer under the hood of being a DJ and being a rapper. So I'm glad you went there and we unpacked it a little bit. So then your corporate career, you're in change management at a bank. And we had a conversation about that the other day, which was fascinating. Do you want to share a little bit about what the corporate experience was like for you? And for those that are listening that are in that place, but are probably leaning towards a purpose or a calling outside of their corporate career, how that journey unfolded for you?
I ended up in the corporate world the way many people do. And I call this operating according to default settings of reality. What does that even mean? The default settings of reality are basically, go to school, get a diploma like I did, political science and communications. What do you do with it? I'm not sure. Well, I saw Wall Street, with Michael Douglas, and he sure looked impressive with his haircut, with his suit, with the fancy offices, the marble and the gold, and all this seemingly purposeful activity of running around these computer screens and Excel spreadsheets and, making all this money. So essentially, those are like default settings of reality. See something on TV, go to school, get a diploma, and then go apply for a job in some fancy office building where you think the reality of the film that you saw pretty much matches the reality of what actually happens in those ivory towers. So I ended up, like you said, working in a TD Bank. I'm not sure how many of your listeners will know it, but it's one of the biggest banks in North America. I worked at head office, Bay Street, 37th floor, TD Tower, downtown Toronto. And I'm not going to lie, the first few months, even the first year, you're kind of under this honeymoon spell. Ooh, look at me. I am sitting on the subway on my way where? To the 37th floor of this beautiful, slick black tower, Bay Street, Toronto. I got my business card. It's got a long title, which nobody can guess what it means. But when they see it, they're too embarrassed to ask, what does it even mean? So they don't. So you take a lot of pride and a lot of, I would even say like joy. Maybe joy is a strong word, but you're certainly content with yourself in the beginning. The conference calls, gathering with your coworkers around the coffee machine, the routines and rituals of the corporate life. This is culture. Right? This is a cult. A cult is like worshiping something. And in a way, a lot of folks who are fresh from university and they enter this corporation, they're so number one, ambitious, and they're so sponges. They want to eat everything up. And as soon as they arrive on their first day, this is how it goes. This is your coffee machine. This is your cubicle. This is your business card. This is your pass with your picture on it. You kind of buy into all of that. That's the first year. That's when you're so hell-bent on assimilating yourself after just finishing school, and you don't know anything about the world and you're trying to prove yourself to the world. But what happens to some people is that at some point there is what I call this life detector that starts knocking on your door and saying, okay, now that the honeymoon is over, does this business card with an executive title that is almost longer than the card itself, does it actually mean anything? Let's be brutally honest here. Does it actually mean something? And I found that some people that I was with on this excursion, this corporate excursion, about my age, they've also experienced the same sort of callings and doubts as to okay, all of this, the 37th floor, the black tower, the nice cards, all of it, yeah. Okay, it's an external thing. But when I'm alone and thinking about my life, what is this? It's just a piece of paper, this card. This is just a building like any other building. Am I actually doing something that my calling, my soul is asking me to explore. So I've noticed some people would answer that question, or at least try to answer that question. And those of us are the seekers, the ones who are a bit restless. We don't want to just settle no matter what the fancy stuff is happening around us. And then I noticed some people who literally like, no, this is it. I'm bought in. I'm here holding on to this cubicle and I'm waiting until I get my pen with my name engraved on it in 25 years or whatever. I want to be clear. I'm not knocking anybody who chooses the corporate path. There are people in there who are artists in their own right. By artists, I mean their soul's calling was to be a business analyst. It was to be a project manager. They loved the art of organizing everything in spreadsheets, and they excelled at it. But I'm talking about those of us, those of you who, through no fault of your own, basically kickstarted your career according to the default settings of reality. And at some point you found that you, as a computer, as a device, not that I want to reduce human beings to that, but we're largely that, it wasn't working as you intended. The windows started to open up with a delay. The performance starts to get sloppy. You're just not really feeling alive where you find yourself according to the default settings of reality. Well, that's a beautiful thing if you notice that. The first thing is awareness. That's the thing we learn in change management. There's a whole model to change. You cannot change if you're not aware that there needs to be a change. So for any of you listening, for any of you watching, be glad that you may be experiencing some restlessness, some discontent, some frustration in your life, because that is always, and it's always inevitable, that this is the first step to something potentially that is an adventure awaiting for you. But you have to stick with this discontent. You have to stick with this restlessness, this initial phase of confusion maybe. And I'm glad to get into it a little more if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm curious about how you started to find that path outside of corporate and how that started to appear for you and when you knew to take that leap of faith. So maybe we should go there for a little bit.
In my case, after a few years working in a corporation and realizing, because here's the thing, the more disgruntled I became as a corporate employee, the less nonsense I could tolerate in my everyday meetings with coworkers. So keep in mind that I was living two lives at the time. I was DJing 4 nights a week in Toronto up until 4 a.m. and then getting to work at about 8:30 in the morning after just 3 hours of sleep and my ears still ringing. So the ears ringing, the lack of sleep compounded with like, why am I even sitting in a spreadsheet? Like my soul has nothing to do with spreadsheets. Those two things compounded caused me to just have zero tolerance for any corporate lingo, for any of this language that, people tend to use in a corporation to pretend they're actually thinking critically, when a lot of times they're not. So I'd be sitting in morning meetings and, let's say Bob would be like, we really have to ensure that we maximize all synergies to ensure shareholder value. And I would be like, is it just me? Or like, that didn't mean anything. You could say that and be perfectly safe. And like, I noticed everyone would just nod their head and I'll be like, everyone's nodding their head, but like, we haven't actually moved forward. So because of my lack of sleep irritation with the fact that, I may be sitting in a place that I'm not supposed to be sitting in, I would actually start challenging these things like, Bob, what do you actually mean? Like, so what synergies, right? Obviously, we want to maximize shareholder value, but like, what do you exactly specifically mean when you say maximize all synergies? Isn't that what we're trying to do every day? Like, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to get fired eventually because I'm just this grumpy dude who's challenging everybody. But what actually happened was the reverse. People were like, oh, this is leadership material here. We have a person who is pragmatic, who wants real productivity, not just corporate lingo, right? So the funny thing is I actually started getting more money and I started getting promoted. And when I realized that these promotions and more salary was not pacifying my soul, I realized, okay, this is something that you have to do. You have to explore what's happening there. What is this discontent? Where's the root of it? What do we do about it? And so very simply put, and this is what I always recommend to everyone who's feeling discontent at their current place of work. Number one advice, eat lunch alone. Stop hanging out with your coworkers during lunch, commiserating, complaining, patting each other, hugging each other about how terrible corporate life is or whatever, because that's what happens over the Chinese combo number 5 in the food court of your workplace. You're all like, another day at the office. Yeah. Well, it could be worse. Yeah, it could be worse. Oh, amazing Chinese food. I mean, the Chinese food is really like the only thing, this routine and ritual that keeps people somewhat alive until lunch. Anyway, then maybe you have a mini heart attack in your cubicle in the afternoon. Now, I didn't want to die in my cubicle. So it was very important for me to explore, if not this cubicle, then what? Eating lunch alone is the first step. Why? Because you're extracting yourself from your current circumstances, which very often cement people's self-identity. You are what you do every single day. So if you're eating Chinese food with your coworkers at a job you don't necessarily like, you become that. So in order to have any chance of actually, having a freedom of purpose and a career that is based on your calling, you have to extract yourself from all the stimuli, all the things that solidify your identity as this person who just does a job they don't like, and it's okay because other people do it too, and there's Chinese food. So I started having lunches alone, walking away from the TD Tower, half an hour walk, beautiful synergy because you get some steps in, eating lunch alone, silence, and carrying my journal around. I don't have it with me here. It's in my backpack. I'm not going to reach for it. But my journal became my best friend. I didn't know anything other than that I was unhappy in the beginning. I didn't think that something like my passion, which is music, could actually become my full-time career. But all of those things were intertwined as all these kind of thoughts that are all in knots behind my eyes. Thoughts that are in knots behind my eyes. I'm still rapping, dude. See, like once a rapper, you're always... Okay, so it's really hard to sort out your life if you're just sort of like wondering about things and ruminating, because all of these things are happening behind your eyes. So the whole key is like spill everything in front of your eyes because you can't sort what you cannot see. And so all of these lunches alone, many, many weeks at a time, months at a time, alone, did two things for me. Number one, they gave me a vision of the fact that I am not 100% a full-time employee of TD Bank Financial Group, I am not 100%. This is not my identity. During that 1 hour of lunch alone, I realized there's a world outside of this tower. There is sunshine. And there are people walking, and there is a world that exists that you could actually explore outside of the tower. It kind of sounds silly, right? But like you become so tuned in to like your everyday rituals, wherever, whatever your world is, that sometimes you forget about it. So that's the number one thing. I became aware that there's a world outside. There are possibilities outside of the Black Tower. The second thing is through this process of spilling and sorting, realized that, very simply put, my calling is to be creative, is to say something, do something, create something that will move another human being. Not moving a cell in a spreadsheet, not move a meeting from Monday to Thursday, not move a deadline for a project for some kind of synergy to maximize shareholder value. No, create something concrete that's going to move another human being. That was the first step, really. Realize the world exists outside of the current circumstances. And number two, that I had some kind of a general compass setting to say, okay, I just don't belong in the corporate world. I need to be creating.
So someone's listening and they're resonating with what you're saying. Maybe they're having those thoughts right now, wherever they find themselves at the moment, but they're not quite sure, where do I go? Where do I take this? And I know you have an incredible approach to journaling, which you started to lean into a little bit. Do you want to share how you go about it? Because the approach that you shared with me that you would take to it, I found was very helpful for people to unpack what's going on inside and starting to distort what's useful. So I'll give the floor over to you.
The number one rule is like you are being operated by a lot of things that you cannot see. Okay, these are your thoughts and your beliefs. They are operating you for better or for worse. If you happen to be aware of them, you're operating on a more conscious level. If you are just going through your days and you are masking or numbing some of the things that are making you feel pressure, making you feel pain, making you feel frustration, all of which are seemingly negative things. But in hindsight, I would argue that every moment of discomfort in my life was a window of opportunity for a possibility, for a great possibility, for a level up in this video game of life. I'm not saying anything revolutionary here, okay? But these are things that you cannot just listen to us talk about. These are things that you literally have to embody in your own daily practice. And so the number one thing is we've established that you're being operated on through external circumstances. Number one, that's default settings of reality. And number two, your invisible world, your thoughts, your beliefs, which to a large extent, until you become self-aware, are operating you on autopilot. And so the first step is to literally see what is happening behind your eyes. You cannot sort what you cannot see. This is why people brainstorm on a whiteboard. Why do we do that? Because when you have a brainstorm, the brainstorm is happening back there. Now, what would happen if you didn't spill it on the whiteboard? It would be as good as useless because your brain would be storming, but you wouldn't see the results of it, the fruits of it. Now, if you cannot actually spill the results of the brainstorm, how can you make sense of all the things? Why do you want to make sense of all the things? The reason why you want to make sense of the things that are happening behind your eyes is because they are not all equal as far as their usefulness. There's a lot of garbage happening behind your eyes, a lot of thoughts that are not going to be useful in your authoring of your future career, of your future life. And so the key is to actually put everything in front of you. I call this spilling. And you can do this. And I advise, by the way, I am going to pull out my journal just so people don't think it talks about journals, but there's too many people on the internet who don't practice what they preach. Oh yeah. This is the most revolutionary technology, far superior than the latest iPad with the M chip 2, whatever. The reason why is because number one, it's tactile. We are more than any other generation not in connection with ourselves because we're constantly staring at some screen external to us. And that screen has feeds which are irresistible and hooks which are irresistible. So we spend most of our life there. I invite you to close down your screen and to open up an analog journal, which is tactile. Feel it, smell it. Ah, it's beautiful. Paper, real life. What do you think we are most attracted to as humans? Real, the authentic. Well, this is as real as it gets, right? And then I want you to open up to a blank page, and there's a wonderful feature programmed into this technology. It comes by default in its settings with 0 pop-ups and notifications. So you don't have to search in your settings to see where you actually have to change that so you don't get, interrupted. I want you to walk away from your current circumstances, whatever they are, just for half an hour, get a walk in. I want you to get yourself a beautiful, beautiful beverage of your choice. It could be a tea, it could be a coffee, it could even be a beer, whatever. And I want you to have a conversation with yourself on these pages. First thing you're going to do is spill whatever's on your mind. There's no formats here. You see, this is where technology goes wrong because Notion has a way of entering data. You still have to create a page. Where is this page now? Okay. Oh, I didn't mean to press that. I got to delete it. Oh, you got that. Every app dictates what you're going to do step by step. So it influences your behavior. This does not. If you don't like writing, you draw, you sketch with your pencil. This is the beautiful thing about it. Completely freestyle. Spill everything that's on your mind. Everything. Okay. Then when you're done spilling, I just want you to circle the things that stand out to you at this particular moment in time. And trust me, your conscience knows what's important right now or where it's trying to move you. It's trying to communicate with you the whole time. Well, we're not listening. We're locked into our feeds. So you're going to circle everything. And then whatever you circled, those are the words that you're going to carry with you to the next day, to the day after, to the week after. And their meaning might not be immediate, but it will be revealed inevitably, always. You might not know it right now, but you have to remember, when you start this process, your ability to tune into your inner transmission and your antenna is all out of whack. You've been running on default settings for so long that you're not yet a black belt in the sport of tuning into yourself. When you're done with the spilling phase and the sorting phase, to start formalizing and crystallizing everything that you've spilled, because we're doing this for a purpose. This is just a necessary first step before you formalize your values, your virtues, and your vision.
I think it would be helpful to elaborate a little bit if someone is at that crossroads and they are looking for some practicality around sorting through what's going on for them in their mind, and they're having trouble sort of understanding where that takes them.
3 simple prompts or frameworks that I found the most powerful in my life, and they still serve me today. You want to draw 4 circles on a page. The number 1 circle is going to be, what do you love more than anything else? So draw a circle and heart, and just make a list of all the things that you love, people, things. Second circle is, what can you be number 1 at in the world? So I want you to draw the second circle and write number 1. Now, this requires a certain amount of self-honesty and introspection and self-knowledge, because I see in my work a lot of people who are deluded. I'm sorry to say, but brutally, honestly speaking, they have not done enough introspection to be able to recognize their strengths and their weaknesses. So they confuse the things they love with the things they're good at. In the reality of the real world, that's not how things work. You have to be clearly able to recognize what are the skills that could actually make you compete against the world's best. The third circle, you're going to draw a dollar sign. Those are the things that the market will be willing and able to pay you for. Now, notice that the things you love or the things that you're best at, the market may not necessarily be willing to pay you for. So the goal of this exercise is obviously to list all of the things and then to start circling the things that could maybe find themselves in the middle of those circles. And the fourth circle is meaning, usefulness. This looks at your vocation in a bit of a deeper way. And the reason why I add this circle is because I've realized that, for instance, someone might love being an entrepreneur. They might be very, very good at being an entrepreneur. And selling caffeinated drinks, for instance, as an entrepreneur, might be their route to the marketplace because the marketplace is willing to buy caffeinated drinks. But this kind of arrangement has a potential of not necessarily, in my opinion, making the world a better place. Meaning, in your quest to succeed as an entrepreneur selling caffeinated drinks and to expand your marketplace, I don't know, you might shortcut your way, possibly, and say, hey, the 12-year-olds, we haven't tapped that market yet. Let's go after the 12-year-olds with the taurine, with the caffeine, right? Why not? I'm good at business. I love it. And the market is willing to pay for it. Yes, but it's not necessarily making the world a better place. And I hope anyone who's watching and listening to this, you want to add a constructive brick as a part of your legacy and not necessarily just leave a successful business behind that didn't actually serve the world. So that's the first exercise. 4 circles, write down all the things and then see if there's anything in the middle. That's a very good clue to your potential future or your potential calling. The second exercise, I call it RARE. It's an acronym. So the first R is your remarkabilities. Remarkabilities, I want you to think back to any time in your life where you have accomplished something which others objectively notice and say, whoa, man, Aaron, you really do that content thing, or thinking about content, or like strategic content. It's like you're born for this stuff. It could be anything, folks. It doesn't have to be professional. It could be solving a Rubik's Cube faster than anybody else. It just means that you're above average. When you're doing that thing, you're tuned in a way that other people marvel at. Those are your remarkabilities, abilities that others would remark about. Now, A, second letter in RARE, is aspirations. What do you want to get good at? What is it that you feel you could commit your life to, your time and your effort? Who do you aspire to become? The next R now brings us from the world of aspirations and superpowers that are unique to us into our daily reality. I believe there are no coincidences. There are only signs. And your reality right now, even though you may not be fully satisfied with it, is showing you doors or windows or portals or possibilities for your level up. And sometimes people are so busy chasing what they want that they do not learn the art of wanting what they get. And then the E in the RARE, the last letter, is elevation. Initially, it was energy. I was like, what are the things that give you energy? Who are the people that give you energy? But I've realized in my own life, folks, and I've thought a lot about this. It's thousands of words written in these pages of my journal. Not everything that gives you energy is good for you. There are different kinds of energy. So I've realized the energy that we are after is the energy that elevates, which is sometimes confused by people who have not done a lot of introspection with any kind of energy. What makes you enthusiastic, but also spending time with it improves you as a human being and doesn't degrade you, doesn't turn you into someone impulsive who's always chasing after their instincts. We're only on exercise 2. The third one will be short then, okay? And I take this from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Effective People or First Things First. I'm not sure, but it's a funeral exercise. Who would be at your funeral? Write this down in your journal. That reflects your roles and all the people that you would like to be at your funeral. And then what would they say about you? That is basically expressing the ideal person you'd like to become in all those different areas or roles in your life. I've remixed this exercise and I call it Under the Streetcar. So imagine today you were chasing some deadline, you ran out, you got hit by a streetcar, you're laying under the streetcar. What are the first things that come to your mind immediately? Write them down in your journal. Do your best to imagine this is it. You're under the streetcar. It's over. What comes to your mind first? Because that is a good clue of what your conscience and what your calling are trying to communicate to you as important areas to pay attention to. So it could be family. Oh gosh, I don't even have a will. Or my goodness, I spent all this time chasing career. I don't spend any time with my kids. That's it. As soon as I get up from under the streetcar, brush myself off because I have that luxury still. This is just a mental exercise. I'm going home. I'm going to just sit with my kid for 15 minutes, whether I feel like it or not. Whatever it is, it'll be different for everyone. And that's the beauty of learning about yourself. There's no formulas. It's all about discovering your unique transmission, which is trying to communicate itself to you.
I like all 3 of those exercises very much. And if you're listening, don't be on the sidelines. Get to work and put them into action. I want to circle over to stillness and the analog clock philosophy and what role that can play in discovering your purpose and finding that path towards your calling. So do you want to share a little bit on that?
I recently came up at a recent workshop that I did with this analogy, which came to me during what? Journaling. Silence. You will be amazed at what kind of things your inner source is trying to transmit to you. But it cannot do so when you're surrounded by stimuli. So this is what I always talk about, which is there's a quality, there are levels to the game of silence. This is why I always recommend that before people spill and sort, they actually set a clock. I have another amazing piece of technology here. For those who are listening to the podcast, I'm holding up an analog kitchen timer. For those of you who are watching, you can see this timer in my hand. In addition to my journal, another beautiful piece of technology, because again, this timer doesn't have pop-ups, notifications, distractions. You set a time and then it makes a sound when the time is finished. So the first step to good silence because why are we doing silence in the first place? Because we want to establish a good connection with our signal within. So I don't recommend, for instance, that people run off the street or from their busy lives right into journaling. The chance of you spilling something that is lying deep within you, that is important and trying to communicate itself to you, they're very slim. Whereas if you preface or if you start with 7 minutes even of silence before you start spilling and sorting in your journal, there's a much better chance that now you've achieved this kind of frequency in your level of being, which is able to see things at the bottom of the well. Picture a submarine. The submarine has what sticking out of the water? A periscope. Most of us are living our lives as if it is the periscope that is steering the submarine. The propeller on the back of the submarine is your emotions. This is what moves the submarine forward. The entire problem that we're facing as human beings today is that we are allowing the periscope to set the direction of our vessel, of our life, of our being. And then we use emotions to propel ourselves to wherever the periscope is pointing. It could be this influencer. It could be that stimuli. It could be this shiny object. It could be that siren. It doesn't matter. All of those things are external. No external thing can ever point you to the path that belongs uniquely to you. The reason why we do silence is because we want to build a muscle, not the external muscle. We want to build the all-important inner muscle of freedom, of being able to sit while millions of stimuli assault us from left, right, up, below, and you're able to sit still because you have committed and chosen to sit still.
For those that are sitting on the sidelines and not putting themselves onto the field yet, what would you say to those people?
I've realized that I am not someone who wants to run away from the world. So for all of you who may say, I'm not, I don't want to sit in silence. I want to do things. I want to do things too. The question is, will you go out into the world with a frequency and an aliveliness and a being that strikes other people as unique and remarkable, which is a direct product of you sitting in silence? I hope I'm not distorting or clipping here because I'm raising my voice. But really, your output in the world, whatever you decide to do, will only have the quality of the introspection and the solitude you've been able to accomplish in your life. If you look at the history of our civilization, the best architects, artists, musicians, writers, how much time have they spent in solitude to try to tune into that inner voice and then to express what they're hearing out there? So for those of you who are sitting on the sidelines and thinking, I really do want to lead an active life, I want to convince you that the first step to an active life is an active, authentic life. Not just activity, not just running on a treadmill, then getting off in sweat and realizing that you actually haven't gone anywhere. You're still in the same place, but now tired and sweating. I want you to actually go somewhere, and not just anywhere, but the very destination that your calling is saying is a destination for you. Never mind what everybody else is doing. These are your mountains to climb. You can't establish your direction and set your compass unless you take time to tune into the silence. And then when you do that, your activity out in the world will be much more purposeful, much more joyful, much more fulfilling than if you just went out there without setting your destination and your compass.
I think if someone has tuned in to this point in the conversation, clearly they've resonated with what you're saying, or else they would have left. How can they get in touch? How can they follow you? How can they find you to continue this conversation and to continue learning from you?
If there are any musicians who are listening to this, I have a place where I have taught musicians who are struggling to find a way to make a living with their talent. And this is all based on my own story of the breakthrough from going from the corporate world into a full-time career as a music producer and a craftsperson. So I basically teach everything I know, and you can find that under Making Music for Brands, because that's been my calling for the past 17 years or so, creating songs, scores, or sounds for some of the world's biggest brands. And now I've basically laid it all out step by step to other folks who want to do this. And now the new calling that I have identified during my silence, spilling, and sorting is to reach a wider audience. If you're a human being who's interested in unlocking your unique calling, unlocking more fulfillment, more purpose in your life, unlocking more creativity and clarity, then this is what my new chapter is all about. Sign up on my email list. You go to TommyZee.com and you just sign up on my email list. And we're developing a program right now, which is a culmination of everything I know about how to design your life one day at a time.
Amazing. And if this is your first time stumbling across the podcast, make sure you subscribe or follow the show so you can catch all new episodes on demand. If you can leave a 5-star review on the platform you're listening on, please do that. Those links that Tommy Zee mentioned will be in the show notes below, so you can go discover them. Tommy, thanks so much for the conversation, brother. I think everyone got a ton of value out of what you shared today.
I really hope so. And thank you for that.
That was Tommy Zee, and no doubt if you got to this part of the conversation, you'll be hearing plenty more from him and seeing that content in circulation. Thanks for listening.